So welcome back, friends. My name is Scott Atnip, and I'm Texas Impact's Outreach Director, and we want to welcome you to the second session of Texas Impact's Faith and Democracy, Lifting Dallas Voices for Justice. This session is being hosted by leaders from Friendship West Baptist Church, who I will introduce momentarily. But first, a little bit of background and some logistics. Today's event has 4 sessions. This is the second of those 4, and you're welcome to attend as many as you want. If you're on this one, I assume that you've received the links for the 3rd and 4th. This is the second in a series of conversations Texas Impact is hosting throughout the state this summer and fall, featuring faith leaders, community leaders, and advocates, along with Texas Impact staff, talking about the importance of Texans of faith, participating in the policy process, and discussing nuts and bolts strategies for you and your congregation to be effective participants in democracy. For those unfamiliar with Texas Impact, we're the state's oldest and largest interfaith network. We are a membership organization, and if today's event inspires you to become even more involved, we hope that you will consider joining. There should be a link in the chat momentarily to explore that. So, communities of faith have a heritage of service. We engage in direct acts of compassion towards the most vulnerable members of our community. And while we recognize our calling to be the hands and feet that serve our neighbors, we also believe collectively that we can make a broader impact by changing public policy. And that's where Texas Impact steps in. So this fall, we are prioritizing our Texas Faith Votes campaign, which you can find on our website at texasimpact.org. And momentarily, there will be a link in the chat. That campaign has tools for you and your congregation to promote safe, accountable voting, including a checklist of ways that you and your congregation can get involved to ensure a safe and fair election. We have a Pledge to Vote campaign based on shared priorities of the faith community, including health, immigration, climate, and a rejection of discrimination. So we hope you and your congregation will sign and promote the pledge. And what you are all signed up to hear about today. We have a challenge to recruit election workers, which we'll be discussing during this panel. The next panel will discuss our 4th item, which is promoting vote by mail. So go to our Texas Faith Votes campaign for more information on those. So we also want to thank our Faith and Democracy co-sponsors. I want to make sure we highlight those again in this panel. We are co-sponsored today by the SMU's Perkins School of Theology, the North Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, the Northern Texas, Northern Louisiana Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, Cathedral of Hope United Church of Christ, Episcopal Church of the Ascension, Faith Commons, Faith Forward Dallas at Thanksgiving Square, First United Methodist Church of Dallas, Friendship West Baptist Church, who you see on your screen with us today, Hamilton Park United Methodist Church, Preston Hollow Presbyterian Church, Temple Emmanuel, Wilshire Baptist Church, and White Rock United Methodist Church. So we certainly want to say a thank you to all of those organizations and congregations. I also want to describe the technology for today. So you should see at the bottom of your screen a chat and a Q&A feature. We're treating the chat like a water cooler place to have water cooler type conversations. If you have things that you would typically say to somebody sitting next to you or standing in the back of the room, that's a place to engage in those type of conversations. Texas Impact staff will be in that chat and engaging and answering questions there. If you have questions specifically for the panelists, please put that in the Q&A section. We should have time in this panel and the future ones to get to some of those questions. You can also email me at scott@texasimpact.org, but in all honesty, I probably won't be looking at those until tomorrow because my hope is that you'll be filling up my inbox right now with notifications from our Texas Faith Votes campaign. In the chat, you'll have Texas Impact staff, including our Executive Director, B. Moorhead, Advocacy Director, Josh Houston, Membership and Operations Director, Emma Davis, Communications Coordinator, Joe Zapp, Pastoral Fellows, Sid Earnhardt and Crystal Leedy, and Policy Analyst, Sarah Cruz. And finally, we hope that you'll share this content. We're on Facebook Live right now. This will be on YouTube later in the week, and will be available in our Weekly Witness podcast feed. So share this with people who might be interested. And we hope that you'll share your favorite quotes and challenges for your friends and neighbors using the hashtag #TexasFaithVotes. So with no further ado, I know you didn't come to listen to me do a series of announcements at the beginning. We have 2 of my favorite people who will be leading this conversation, Reverend Danielle Ayers and Cynthia White. from Friendship West Baptist Church, who will talk about the amazing work that they're doing to recruit election workers and train them in the Dallas area. So friends, please take it away.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Texas Impact, for the invitation, and Scott, we certainly appreciate, and I'm excited to be co-presenting with Cynthia White, who will carry the bulk of this presentation with so much knowledge that she has as relates to recruiting election workers. So we'll just start. Now we put the first slide up on the screen. And I just kind of talk through, my goal is to just kind of give a broader view of what we're doing around election engagement, because recruiting poll workers is just part of what we're doing. So one of the things we're going to focus on is voter registration and then preparations, right? So first, we're really doing a strong voter registration drive out in the community. So we're out at grocery stores, apartment complexes, other back to school supply drives, wherever people are gathered or people are coming and going. We're trying to register as many people as possible. We also want to prepare people to engage in this election process and beyond the election process. So one of the things we do, we also encourage people to check your voter status, make sure that you are still on the voting rolls and everything is fine. We had someone who tried to vote this past election back in the summer at the runoff, and they were completely off of the rolls, but they had voted in the previous election. So we're also trying to make sure we push for check your voter status. And then the third thing, obviously, we're trying to do is how do we prepare people to be poll workers? What does that really mean? So I'll go into a little bit of that in a moment. And then we're really using a series of social media campaigns to connect and engage people and keep people connected and engaged throughout this entire process, with the hope that we're connecting and engaging for long-term engagement and not just this presidential election, but beyond the election. How do we prepare people to be a part of the political process beyond voting day, to go to Texas State Capitol, to go to DC, to really be engaged in digital movements, if you will, around deal with public policy. So we see this voter engagement in various multiple capacity levels where we're trying to engage people at different levels. But while we're here today is talk about our work around recruiting poll workers. So what we attempt to do is first have folks sign up through a brief survey they take online on our website. And so we can gather if they're registered, if they're a registered voter, where they live, what availability they have to work the polls, just to get a good kind of demographic of what the demographics of people we're going to be working with and talking to. So we have a survey initially folks fill out, and then once we get so many people, we then host more of a educational training session. It's not the training session to be a poll worker, but it is designed so people are clear about what are the roles and responsibilities, what are the different type of ways you can work the polling locations, what's required, because we think it's important to walk people through that process as opposed to just telling folks to sign up to work, and we're not sure if they're going to be actually go through the training or be assigned, because they may go and decide, oh, I didn't know this is the commitment level going in. So for us, our method is to first have the first point of contact with people, walk them through a training process. They're clear about what it is they're engaging in and why they're engaging in this work and what does it mean. And our goal is to stay in contact with the group of people from when we finish our education session, and then we'll do a follow-up email. Oh, were you able to actually go and sign up for the training? Yes, okay. And we follow up again. Once you're done with your training, we want to know if you're completed the actual training. And then once you're done with the training, we'll continue to stay in contact with people to see then where were you placed to actually work a polling location. So our goal is to connect and engage all the way through the training process to the appointment process, so we have a good idea, a sense of knowing this many people went through training and they have been selected to then work at a polling location, so we can know what kind of coverage that we have. And so our recruitment is ongoing. We have probably close to 100 people so far who have signed up to take our education, kind of training session prior to actually making the commitment to work the polls. And so we had our first training last Tuesday, and we had 25 people to attend that. So we'll follow that group of 25, and we'll just continue to do the training and following folks all the way to the end. So that's kind of our methodology. That's how we're organizing the folks, and that's how we're mobilizing people to engage in working the elections or working the polling locations. And so from here, I'm going to ask Cynthia to go ahead and do what she does, an amazing job at. She's very knowledgeable and really giving people the full scope of what to expect, what to anticipate, what the commitment level is, and the importance of working the polls. And I also will say we are working closely with our youth and collegiate pastor, Reverend Magruder, to recruit young folks to work the polls as well. So we're also being very intentional about bringing in younger poll workers as well. So that's how we're trying to frame this, is how we're going after. We're going after our young folks all the way through people who have the ability to work the polls. So we're leaving no one out, and we're trying to engage everyone in this process. So Cynthia, I'll turn it over to you to kind of talk about what we cover in our training sessions and the importance of why it's important to talk to people prior to having them just to go into their county and sign up to work the polls.
Thank you, Pastor Ayers. I appreciate that, those kind words about me. And I just want to say that my knowledge just comes from being a poll worker. I got involved because my children went through the student program, and literally they are election judges at the age of 18, and we have worked for them since they became election judges about 7 years ago. And so our training, my goal for the training at Friendship West, when I was asked to do this training, was to hopefully instill in people to become long-term poll workers, not just, I've been asked to work the election today, and so I'm going to work this election, and then I'm going to drop off. So we start by giving them information about the political engagement needs. We try to connect them with how their civic work in any organization that they are involved in impacts or is impacted by something that's going to have to be voted on. So elections are important for what's going on in your everyday life. We're going to talk about the types of elections, the headwinds that we're going to be facing in 2020, and then we're going to talk about how to become. Then we talk to them about how to become a poll worker and all the things that are involved in becoming a poll worker and how to involve students. So the first thing we talked about was political engagement needs. There are all kinds of political engagement needs, and we just wanted to focus on the three that really are not actually talked about a lot, which is being a precinct chair, poll worker, election judge. So I just gave them information about a precinct chair, because if you want to do work in the community, everybody lives in a precinct, and everybody has a precinct chair, and you can volunteer with that person to help turn out your neighborhood to vote if you're talking about getting people to the polls. Every party has a precinct and precinct chairs, and you can work with that person. That's not the focus of our poll worker training, but I did want to throw that out there. It's kind of my little hobby horse. But anyway, but then when the poll worker and election judge, their job is to conduct a proper and orderly voting experience at their polling location. That is their job. And so that is the political engagement at the level of the poll worker and election judge. So when people come to the polls, it's your responsibility to make sure they get in. They get in, they sign in, they're able to access their ballot, they're able to vote in a stress-free environment, which is going to be difficult this year, and then leave and feel like they have done their civic responsibilities. I try to connect the group to our particular group to the how your civic engagement is impacted by elections, talking about the Highway 67 project. It's called the Southern Gateway Project, and it was originally supposed to be a toll road. And Friendship West, about 15, 20 years ago, started a neighborhood association, and it was just basically involved in neighborhood things. And then they applied for grants and did things that caused them to interact with their elected officials, which, elected officials, you have to have an election, and poll workers work that election to get them in office. And so hopefully you've elected people who are sensitive to your needs. But then the toll road project came along, and that neighborhood association, which didn't think much of itself, ended up being the lead fight in not having Highway 67 become a toll road. And so just to give the people in our church a sense of, this is an organization that we started, and this is an impact that we had on the community, and it was ultimately solved by a bond election. And that bond election, of course, needed poll workers and election judges. And sadly, of the 1.2 million people that voted in that bond election, 48,000 people decided whether or not this project was going to be a toll road or not. Worked out in our favor, but clearly we need voter participation as well as people to run those operations. But the idea was to help people understand that voting is important. Every election is important. You may not, and it affects your life. And that is another reason to be involved, other than, well, this is just a task or something that I need to do. No, it is important because every election probably touches your life in your community somewhere. And we talked about types of elections. And the idea here is to help people understand that there are elections all the time. It's not an election every 4 years. Every first Tuesday in November, there's an election in Texas. And so if you're not having the presidential election, then the next year you're going to have a constitutional election. If you're not having a constitutional election, then the next year you're going to have the election for the governor. And then after the governor's election, there's going to be another constitutional election. And then you have other joint and elections or city elections. Of course, in the year of presidential elections, there's primaries and primary runoffs. Then there are special elections. So if you're going to become a poll worker, you need to understand the commitment that in some years, there could be as many as 5 elections in a single year that you might be asked to work at. And so you can see why the elections department is an ongoing recruiting job for them, because we tend to focus as people on just the big elections, and we don't look at these other elections, which are very important every year because they impact your everyday life. And so then we talk to them about knowing what the things are during those elections, who you're voting for, and why is it important. It's like, why is it important to vote for the railroad commissioner? You know, why should you pay attention to that? That's a name, sounds like it has nothing to do with you until you understand that they regulate gas lines in the oil and gas industry, that the gas lines that run through your neighborhood. So everybody that you're voting for somehow impacts your life. And as a poll worker and election judge, you need to do more than just come and work the election, but you need to be a little bit knowledgeable, and even as voters, a little bit knowledgeable about who these people that we're voting for during the various elections and how they impact your life. And so we talked to them a little bit about that. And then also we talked to them about being a precinct chair, because that is the lowest level of elected so that you can be, and they're your neighborhood elected official. And they also are the people who are supposed to be responsible for helping to turn out your neighbors to vote. So, you know, you need to consider that. And then we talked to them about, we want them to go to the election clear-eyed in terms of what's going on in terms of voter suppression and voter intimidation, because they could run into it at their polling place. Now, most elections are boring. Like I say, in that bond election, 1.2 million people were eligible to vote, only 48,000 voted. So most, on election day, all of the voting precincts are open, but there are not many people showing up. So most times you as a judge or a poll worker, it's a very slow day, you're bored all day, you know, they tell you to bring a book to read or a game to play. But in the presidential election and in a contentious election that's coming up this year, you need to be ready for the headwinds. And so we talked to them about the 50,000 poll workers that are going to be recruited, that are being recruited by the GOP. They are being recruited to operate in 15 states, in urban centers in 15 states. And behind that, they're backing that up with a $20 million fund for legal battles so that they can be aggressive. And this is because the 1980, I think it's 1981 court case that didn't allow electioneering by the GOP as aggressively as this was allowed to expire in 2018. And so they're going all out because there are no restraints on this. But this is not as serious as it sounds in Texas because of the rules. And we'll talk about the rules in a minute. But anyway, but these groups, what they're doing is they are creating a mindset in people. And these groups that I have listed here, they're just a random group of an article that I was reading. There are more groups out here. I just picked them because they have these great names, like The Vote, Honest Elections Project, True the Vote. So it's like, okay, these sound like, you know, legitimate groups, but really they are out to spread information. They hype people up. In the GOP fundraising letter, they're raising a Trump army to fight the liberal mob. And so you could have people who are influenced by this rhetoric coming into your polling location. And so the question is how to handle them. And then in Texas, we have our very own specific group called True the Vote. And they started as a Tea Party group in 2009. They got involved with larger groups during the 2012 election. And this year they were at a conference by a group called the Council for National Policy, which was attended by GOP-aligned leaders and Trump re-election officials. And they presented their plan for Texas. Now, I'm going to show you their plan, but how effective this is going to be, I don't know. But their plan for Texas is to get some Navy SEALs in these polls, and they're going to say, no, 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 this is what it says. So first of all, you have to scratch out Navy SEALs because you don't know what, sure, they don't have an agreement with the Navy SEALs to come into the polling location, but the mindset is to have people who are militarized, intimidating looking, to be poll watchers. And so to the extent that these types of people are then recruited by the people who can send people into your polling location, you can have somebody like this show up to your polling location. But there are limits on what that they can do. But you just need to know that there is an organized effort out there to sow chaos. So if you're going to become a poll worker or election judge, you need to have a plan to how you're going to handle disruptive people when they show up, especially if they come through one of the official ways that they can be a poll worker and they're going to be with you for the bulk of the day. So then we talked to them about how to become a poll worker or election judge in Dallas County. And again, an official, a poll worker or election judge is an official who's responsible for the proper and orderly voting at polling locations. And the word orderly is important because if you have these disruptive people come in, it's the election judge's responsibility to maintain order. And there are things you can do to limit the damage these people do in terms of your election process at your polling location. So then we talked to them about how the clerks and judges, how the clerks and judges are chosen, the application process, the expectations of the county and the parties, and the different types of training for the early voting and election day. So election judges are chosen in Dallas County, and I'm assuming it's all over the state of Texas, but I can't vouch for that. The political parties choose the election judges. And so if your precinct was won by a Democrat, the Democratic Party chooses the judge, and the Republican Party chooses the alternate judge, and vice versa. And so whoever won that particular area, they choose the judge, and the alternate judge is the only person that the judge can't fire, basically, or or refuse to work at their location because they are chosen by the party to be the party's representative for your polling location. All right. So, but the election judge is responsible for hiring the staff at their polling location. The election judge has the final word, except for their alternate judge, as to who will work at their site. That being said, any eligible voter can be a poll worker within the guidelines. And so we talked to them about how they can apply. They can apply on their own. You can apply, the judge can recommend you, the parties can recommend you, the elections office is always holding recruiting sessions trying to get poll workers. So the application process, it's online. You can go online to the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. You can go online to the county, and the parties in the county communicate with each other. So if you apply through the county, they're going to send your name to the party, and if you apply through the party, they're going to send your name to the county. And the first person that you can apply through is if your election judge has already selected their team. In that case, the election judge will just send in your information to the county to say, I'm working this site and these are my people. And so that is another way that you apply to be a clerk after you're chosen. So, and actually that's the first thing that happens, and that's happening right now. Like I said, both my daughters are election judges, and they've already gotten their call from the county, and the county's already said, okay, are you going to be a judge? Okay, you're working your site. Do you have your people? And if you don't have your people, then they're going to go through the pool of applicants and try to fill those vacancies. So then we talked to them about the expectations and the qualifications. I don't want to go over my time. And basically you have to be you have to be able to work a minimum number of hours. You need to, if you're going to be an early voting worker, you need to be prepared to work for 2 weeks, including the weekends. And you must be a registered voter unless you're in the student program. And so that all these things are on the election website. They list all of their expectations. One of the things that I try to emphasize for people to remember is this bottom one. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it says be prepared to lift at least 30 pounds. There's a lot of manual labor involved in working the polls. There's equipment to put up, there's tables to move, there's chairs to set up. So there's, you need to have somebody who can actually move things around. And then they have a student clerk program, and high school students who are 16 years of age or older can work the polls. The expectations of them are the exact same thing, exact same as the adult clerks, but they just have to get permission. So the student clerks, the application deadline is September 29, 2020. If you want your student to be involved, they have to have their parents' permission, and they have to have the permission from their principal or their school. And then we talk about training. If you're going to go to training, so we tell them about the training. There are two different kinds of training. There's early voting training, and there's election day training. And even if you work early voting, you will be required to go to election day training. Now, COVID-19 has changed training, so I don't know how that's going to affect the fall. In the prior election just passed, they only trained brand new people because COVID-19. And so they limited the number of people that they were having at the training. And I know it was sad for them because they've got this brand new training facility that just built, and it's fabulous. But they couldn't put people in there like they wanted to. But typically, you have to go to, even if you work 2 weeks in early voting, they will make you come back for election day training. It made sense in the past because equipment used to be different, but now the equipment is the same. But the thing that you have to understand is that paperwork is different. And so you need to go back to make sure that you understand the paperwork, because the paperwork is important. It is what certifies that the election was fair. So you have to make sure that's done properly. All right, and then I go through not all of the pages of the handbook. The Dallas County handbook is on online right now, and you can go to dallascountyvotes.org and find it. And so I just talked to them about some pages that they want to be familiar with on election day. The page 4 of the book is the contact page. Page 5 and 6 is the table of contents, because the handbook is 187 pages. It's very detailed. Dallas County gives you pictures, and they walk you through every process. But your training is 1 day long, all day long, and you're not going to remember all those things. And so you need to know where to find access to that information when a voter walks up to you with a problem, and how can you help them. Page 16 tells you this is important for page 16, 17 through 20. That's important for poll watchers and people who are trying to intimidate you at the poll. It is important for you to read these pages and know who's allowed at the polls, what their certification has to be a poll watcher, because people can't just walk in off of the street and say, I'm going to be a poll watcher for your location. They have to be sent by a party or a candidate or one other person. The other people that can come into your poll worker are the state election officials, but they also will have badges. So the number of poll watchers so going back to that voter intimidation, voter suppression thing, in Texas, you're protected because the number of poll watchers are limited. They have to be certified, and even when they come in, they can't be disrupted. And so the election judge, it'll be your responsibility to stand up to people who want to be disruptive, but other than that, you can kick them out because they cannot disrupt the voting process. So you have the poll watcher laws that are in place that will help you in Texas to maintain order at your polling location, but you might have to stand up to some people. And then we talk about the electronic poll book and the electronic process that's going on. We talk about closing the polls. The other thing I emphasize in the training is the ballot and seal report. They don't emphasize that in the training that much, but what I try to help our people understand is the ballot and seal report is the report that establishes chain of custody. And so at the end of the day, when you're closing out the polls and, you know, the polls are closed at 7 o'clock, time to go home, the election is not over. The election is not over until the judge gets back down to the drop-off point and turns in the paperwork. Because at that point, at your polling location, everything about that election is in the judge's hands. And so you have the computer disk, you have the ballots, you have the unmarked ballots. Everything about that election that happened in your polling location is in the judge's hands. And the ballot and seal report establishes chain of custody. When you deliver all of that stuff back to the elections office, it says that you received the equipment, it was sealed, it was properly sealed, nothing was tampered with, you took care of it all day long, and you have sealed it properly, and you're turning it over to the elections department. It has not been tampered with. Very important report. They don't emphasize it in training, but they expect you to have that paperwork done correctly. And then I talked to them about the equipment, and I didn't talk to them about the pink envelope at the last training, but the pink envelope is a kind of a redundancy in the system in terms of if somebody wants to challenge the election. If something happens at the elections office, and if for some reason all the data was lost, every judge takes home a copy of what happened at their election, and they're to keep it for 22 months in a sealed envelope. And so for some reason, if somebody wants to challenge the election or say something happened, you know, the Dallas County, they have, I don't know if they do it all over the state, but this is an offsite. Okay, let's call all the judges back in, bring your stuff, let's compare. Because you know that what you did that night, you sealed it in an envelope and hasn't been tampered with. And so you can be called back in to say, no, this is what happened at my polling location. So that pink envelope is very important. And then I just talked about the equipment, because the equipment, when you talk about moving 30 pounds, the equipment fills up your car. It's so much equipment that you have to, I don't have a picture of it, but if you go to the election site and it says you have a gray case and a blue case and an orange case, well, you have one orange case, but you might have 7, 8, 9 of those gray or blue cases. So you need to be prepared to handle all of the equipment that they're going to ask you to take care of. And I think I'm far beyond my time, so I will stop there. Oh, I'm sorry. I do want to talk about COVID-19 and to say that the elections department does have a plan. And if you voted in the last election, you saw that they put up plexiglass screens, they had hand sanitizer, they had gloves, they had masks. They'll provide all that to you. I would say take your own mask, because I really wasn't impressed with their masks. But other than that, I think that they tried to put in a good faith effort to protect the election workers. And then these are the websites. You can go to dallascountyvotes.org and get all this information I just talked about. You can get to the state of Texas elections website, and then they have a VoteTexasgov where they are sending you to get all the state of Texas information. And then we talk about next steps with them. And I will stop sharing now, and Danielle, I'll turn that back to you.
So thank you so much, Cynthia. That was a great presentation, a lot of good information. And this is why we do this, because a lot of times I think people may sign up to go into the polls as we're recruiting them, and they may decide this is more than what I thought it was going to be. So we try to be as extensive as we can in terms of information. So when people decide to go out and to sign up, they're like, I know exactly what I'm getting into. I know what to expect. So it's very important in a recruiting process for us is to have that initial contact with people and give them all the information so they can make an informed decision if they want to take on this task, very important task of working the polls in 2020, not just 2020 elections, but beyond that. So thank you so much for that information. That's very, very helpful. And Scott, I'll turn it back over to you. I don't know if you have questions or not. So
we do have some questions, a couple. So first, describe any effort you're making to have poll watchers as opposed to election judges and clerks.
So poll watchers are, so if you go to the state of Texas website, they have a whole handbook on poll watchers. Poll watchers are chosen by the party or the candidate. So you and I can't choose a poll watcher. You know, you can go to the party and say, I recommend this person be a poll watcher. And so that is how you could get involved in the poll watcher process. But you and I can't, you know, basically recruit poll watchers and so send poll watchers out.
So I'm going to take the spirit of one of these other questions. So if congregations are thinking about trying to recruit people, especially younger people, to serve in these capacities, do you have any advice for them on how to reach out and how to get people involved?
It's a paid position, free day off from school, and they pay $16 an hour. So they pay young people pretty good money, and you're there for 12 hours, so you're going to earn, I can't do the math, but you're going to earn, you know, about between $150, $200 from that one day's work.
And that's Dallas specific. Oh, go ahead,
Yeah.
Danielle, sorry.
I was going to add to that, it's also the factor of they can get money, but it's also experience. And it's also, for some, will be able to put down that these are hours that they can use towards their application, their college applications as well.
Right.
My understanding from one of the polling judges. And I think the way to do that, if you have in your congregation a youth pastor, a collegiate pastor, that you would use that person to really try to recruit not just inside or to help your churches engage outside of the walls of the church, and you're able to reach out into those who are in school as well, right? So for us, we're using our youth pastor to talk to not just those youth and young adults who are inside our Friendship West, but connections we have outside. So every opportunity that he has, if he's having some kind of Zoom conference, youth revival, whatever the case may be, he's lifting that up. So it's how do you always lift up the opportunity for youth and young adults to be engaged in the process.
And the other thing that, like I said, my daughters work, and both of their polling locations are heavily Hispanic. And so once they get a bilingual, they get bilingual students. They get Hispanic students that can actually speak Spanish, and as their bilingual clerks. And once those students come and work, they tend to come back because they see that their people, the elders in their neighborhood who come to vote, and there's nobody there for them to communicate with. So they come back because they come back with that sense of obligation. I need to help my community, and they gain that real fast. And then they if you're a nice election judge, students can also request a judge that they want to work for. And so if they find a judge that's good to them, like my girls don't have any problem now with bilinguals because their students request to work with them. But they come back out of that sense of obligation. I need to come because my community needs me. And if they can get them there after that first time, those students tend to come back.
I assume it also would be a good opportunity for congregations to work with local colleges or universities, political science departments, Spanish departments, HBCU.
Right. And high school social studies groups.
Cool. Yeah. Have a question here from somebody who lives in Collin County, so cannot work in Dallas County. What else can she do on election day? She's worried about sites having very long lines.
So in Dallas County and Tarrant County, there are vote centers. And so if there is a long line at one location, it doesn't matter because they can go to another location. Every vote center is required to list like the next 3 or 4 closest voting sites. And so if people don't want to stand in line at one location, they can call and find out if another site is less busy and they can go there. Somebody asked that in training, and they were talking about there's going to be a reduction in polling locations. But if you go to the Secretary of State's website, they say that the law does not allow them to reduce the number of polling sites on a general election. So every voting location so Dallas County has 775 voting precincts, but all those voting precincts won't be a voting location because some of them only have 1 or 2 voters, 50 voters in them. So they will consolidate up to about 750 voters, but whatever those voting locations have been in the past, they will be open on election day. And all of them will be vote centers. And so you'll be able to vote anywhere in Dallas County.
So that leads us to another question that asks, how does the choice of judge versus alternate work with countywide voting?
Okay, so the parties select the parties select the judges. The the party that won selects the judge, and so it's all over the county. So, and I'm assuming it's precinct by precinct. Whoever won that precinct, that's who gets the judge. So if the Republicans, so if you live in an area where most of the precincts were run by Republicans, then the Republican Party gets to choose the judge. If you live in a part where Democrats won the precincts, then the Democrats choose the judge. That's my understanding how that works.
So this is more of a political question. I'm not sure which one of y'all will take this one. So this person has never seen or heard from their precinct chair and never met her at any of the party-specific clubs they attend. Someone challenged her in 2018, but the challenger lost. Any advice?
It's an elected official, and you have to think about it. Like I said, I talked about the election for the bond election. 1.2 million people are eligible to vote. Only 48,000 voted. Well, in your precinct, my precinct has about 2,000, a little less than 3,000 people. So we're on a slow election. We get a little bit bigger turnout than Dallas County, but I think the last election it was like 16%, whereas Dallas County had 10% or something like that. So that's 500 people. If you are involved in your community at all, then you can go out and run in your precinct and win that election and do the work. To me, it's the most unused tool that either one of the political parties has, because like I say, most people haven't met their precinct chair, but the precinct chair has the keys to the kingdom. They have the voter list. They know now our precinct chair, because we know this, we already have our plan in place for our precinct. She's already identified all the voters who are 65 and older. We're going to send out, going to ask Pastor Ayers to print some flyers for us. But we're going to send out a letter. It's going to be nonpartisan because even though she's a Democratic precinct chair, she's being sponsored by the Neighborhood Association, and we're just going to send out the notice to everybody at 65 and over that they can get a ballot, absentee ballot, so they can vote at home. We're going to do that. We're going to do a calling campaign. So if you have that, our precinct chair, and if you work it, but you said this is going to be public on YouTube and everywhere, and I don't really want to say this out loud, but right now, I just don't think it's effectively used. I think that they want to use it, the parties, but I don't, you have to have the people in place who will actually go out and do the work.
Okay, we have way too many questions for me to get to all of them, but I'm going to package up a couple here at the end and then give y'all a chance to give a closing challenge to people who are listening. So we have a couple questions related to security. One asks about what kind of protection folks have, and another asks about what happens if what kind of security is there if there's a hostile or intimidating person who doesn't belong at the polling place. So how do they handle, how are those handled? And then I'll let y'all close it out with what challenge do y'all have for people who are watching today, and what can they do to get involved?
So security is handled in a number of ways. So depending upon your polling location, it might have security. Like if your polling location is the courthouse, the sheriff's departments are in charge of security at a courthouse, so they'll be there. But most polling locations are in schools or churches or other places, so you don't necessarily have security other than your staff, but you can call police because the election judge has authority to have people arrested. So if somebody's causing problems at your polling place, you just call 911, have the police come and arrest those people. But the problem is you got to wait for the police to come. Now they do you do have a tech that comes in and checks on you a couple times, depending on how busy the election is. The tech tries to come at least once during the election, during the day, to check on you. And you can always call your tech, and your tech travels with security. When your tech shows up, he shows up with the sheriff. So if you're having any kind of problems at all and your tech shows up, the police are with him. So, but other than that, and I forgot to mention too, the 100-foot radius around the voting site, that is your area to make sure you maintain order in. And so if people are going to show up trying to do voter intimidation, they can't be within 100 feet of your polling place. And if they're doing something outside of that, you can still certainly call the police on those people. And so, but in terms of protection, it just depends on who you recruit as a staff. But one of our recommendations is to always have a young man or a student as part of your staff, number one, to do the manual labor, help you lift those tables and move the things around. But also if somebody's, being belligerent, it's not, most election workers are in their 70s or used to be. And so you don't want, but they're expecting that because of COVID-19, all these people are not going to work. And so, but still, you still don't want that the only person between you and somebody who's militarized be a 70-year-old lady trying to stand up to this guy.
Right.
So we need people, younger people, to step up. And as my neighbor told me, it's your turn now. We've done it.
Right. All right, Reverend Cynthia, thank you so much. Reverend Ayers, want to close us out? Anything you'd like to leave us with today?
Well, the main thing I want to leave everyone with is just come up with your version of this, your plan. I think it's critical that we actively recruit. So whatever social media platform you have, however, if you're in a congregation, if you're in a community organization, whatever platform you have, I think we have to, even like starting today, to reach out to all people of ages, as Cynthia mentioned, our receiving folks. We don't want to put them at risk, but we can get younger people to sign up, to actively, fully, heavily recruit younger people to really come out to sign up to work the polling locations. I think that's going to be critical to this upcoming election, to really to make sure it's fully staffed. Because we had an issue last election before last, the judges just didn't show up. So in our side of town, it was backed up. People were frustrated. They were leaving. So for us, it's about how do we ensure that we have enough people to work these polling locations, and not just Dallas County. It's going to be all over. And I've talked to several election judges who told me, Danielle, we need a lot of people. So I would encourage you, wherever county you live in, to just yourself sign up to work a poll, and then recruit others to work the polling locations as well. If you're our congregation, it's even more important. You can even get people in your congregation to sign up to work the polls, and then maybe they can recruit people to work. I just think the main thing now is just stressing the importance that we must have people in place. And this, particularly your now early voting is a week earlier as well, so it's been extended. So I think we have to really be vigilant in making sure people are signed up, prepared, and understand the commitment level, and to show up. Not just voter registration to get out to vote, but are we prepared to handle the folks who show up to vote? And as Cynthia was saying, be very conscious about the type of intimidation that's sure to take place. And I would just want to add one last thing. I know at Friendship West, this could be other sites. We personally make sure that we have security on site. So you may have some places that will probably just on their own have security. That can be something you can ask and inquire about once you know where you're going to be working in terms of an election judge.
All right. So I'm looking at the chat now. I'll also just add, there are a lot of people talking about this election, and this is one way for congregations to be a part, to see what happens and to be able to report back, right? Like most of the people I talk to who've worked elections have been able to come back and talk about like how beautiful democracy is, right? And so this is a chance for us to protect democracy and to be a part of it in a very real way. So we hope congregations will do everything that we can to get people to serve in this important role. And I really thank both of you for the information today. Cynthia, Reverend Ayers, y'all are amazing, and I'm inspired and hope that all of us can follow your lead in our congregations. A lot of people have been asking about how they can get this information, and we'll have this. We're going on Facebook Live right now, so you can check our Facebook page to see what you missed, or check our YouTube channel later this week, and our Weekly Witness podcast feed will also have the audio. So check out the websites, share this content with your friends and congregations, and let's get to work. Before our next session is at 4:15, and we'll be talking about one way that we can make those lines a little bit shorter, which is by encouraging people to vote by mail. So we hope you'll tune in at 4:15 for that next panel. We'll have about a 9-minute break before we jump back in. Remember that we have our Texas Faith Votes webpage that we've linked a couple of times with information about how you can promote safe and accountable voting this election season. And if you support the work of Texas Impact, we hope you'll consider becoming a member by going to texasimpact.org/join. Friends, thanks for tuning in. We'll look forward to seeing you in about 10 minutes. Thanks again. All right. Danielle, Cynthia, thank y'all again. We'll catch y'all later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.